Up here in Cottonwood Bayou, all the back lake back there, we've had pretty nice weather up until late last week. We had another one of these fronts that's come through and another front that backed up behind it. So it changed all our fishing completely. We were on a pretty decent springtime pattern that was in play for a couple of weeks, and those fish were really starting to push up in the grass areas and getting ready to, at least felt like they were getting ready to lay eggs, and you were catching lots of male trout in and around these particular areas. So the one thing that's happened is once you kind of get that pattern established and you stick with that pattern for a while because that's what it's telling you, then we have these fronts come in, that changes the ball game completely. So you have to kind of refigure out what's going on. So we had some coastal flooding in here for a few days, so it really opened up these back lake areas, like in here in Cottonwood Bayou, and down here in the Shell Bayou area as well. So we can get back up in these places like this and work all these shorelines, these edges, and we found fish back in these areas. I mean, that's just the pattern that had really kind of lent itself to do this. What was showing out on front, not a whole lot of activity on these shorelines on the bay sides, like in San Antone Bay, or maybe over on Ayers Dugout or in Mesquite Bay areas. But when we get back up in the protected areas, it's got the grass, it's got the flats. You've got little islands that are just little individual ones that you can work in and around, and work the grass flats over and around those areas. That's where we've been locating and finding fish back in these areas. Topwater bait has been pretty good. Of course, the main choices that we have had as far as what we've been throwing, we're fixing to be in a new moon phase. We've been in that transition phase, so we've thrown a little bit of everything, and everything's kind of been somewhat productive, but nothing has been just knocking it out of the park productive. So that's why I've always tell you is make sure that you have choices in your box, because there may not be one particular bait that they really want more than anything else. It may be 4 or 5 different flavors that they want, size wise, profile. So just the rundown, topwater bait has been pretty good. Soft dines have been pretty good, although in some of these areas, it's in these back lakes, a little bit more difficult to work the soft dine unless you're really good with keeping that bait suspended above that grass line. The double D has been somewhat productive. Then, of course, our plastics, the rundown there in the down south, in the burners in the original size. So the big Papa Pearl has been great. Twisted Tea's been great. White Ice has been good. Purple Rain. It's just a bunch of these flavors. El Gapo is another one that down south has come out with. It was really good in more of this dirtier water. Of course, then in the knock and tail, the heavy metal, the greenback, and of course the one that came out a few weeks ago is the Rogue flavor has been the most consistent for us in these particular areas. But the thing about it, like I say, we've been throwing a little bit of all of that. Not one particular thing that we have stuck with and then just keep sticking with it and keep catching it. You may catch 4 or 5 off of one particular flavor, and then it kind of dies off, and you change it up a little bit, and you start catching a few off a different flavor. So just kind of, it's the way it's kind of been, especially since this front has changed. Again, lots of water in some of these areas, so it lends you to be able to get back in some of these areas, even if you don't have a super running skinny boat. You can get back in the mouths, and you're able to wade some of these areas and stay protected. Now, just make sure that you can get to these areas that's safely, because it's big, a lot of open water, especially in the San Antone Bay area and Mesquite Bay. They all can get kind of gnarly with that big heavy winds that we've had, 25 to 35 mile an hour winds there for a few days. So it's pretty tough. So this upcoming week that we have is going to be kind of pretty good to begin the week. Then it looks like we've got maybe some heavier winds toward the end of the week. But that's all stuff that's going to be subject to change, especially in this late springtime pattern that we got. Like I say, I was hoping we were going to stay in the warm weather for a while, but Mother Nature had other plans for us. So again, majors and minors have been the main points for us. That's when I've been the most productive in and around those time frames. Just make sure you incorporate one of those into your fishing day, and you will continue to catch and find fish. Back in here on the backside of mud, this is a great area to get into, especially when you got the big heavy winds that we've had over the last few days. You can navigate kind of in and around, coming across Aransas Bay, or if you wanted to run down the Aransas Channel and get into Lydian and kind of burn the shoreline there and kind of get yourself to where you can get across to it. It's just whatever your comfort level is as far as operating in big open water that's that way, especially when you got the big winds. But if you can get in here behind mud, you've got lots of opportunity to find and catch you some fish back. And there's been a decent amount of fish that we've located back in these areas. A lot of it was over grass early, before these fronts pushed in here. We were locating fish all back on these back shorelines as we went down all the way toward the end of Blind Pass, these little back lake areas. You've got that sandbar that goes from the point of mud all the way down to Blind Pass there. And we've been working topwater baits in that shallower section, especially when we had a little bit more water in here to really work it. Because, again, there's lots of heavy grass that's in there. So if it's not deep enough for you to operate in, then it's just not going to be very productive for you. Then you can get out there on the drop on the other side of the sandbar, then you're in probably waist to belly deep water, and we've located some fish in those areas as well. But again, a lot of our fish we've located is going to be over grass. Now again, when we had these big change in the cold fronts that's dropped our water temps, our air temps, and everything, it's pushed these fish off. So where we were locating 10 to 15 days ago is not the case anymore. So you're going to have to kind of put yourself in a condition or a spot, or an area, should I say, where you have a little bit more deeper water access to if you're going to fish early, or if you want to fish it later in the afternoon, allow that water to warm up somewhat. I know it's not a great big warming trim, but it's warmer right now in the afternoons than what it has been in the morning. So, we've had some water temps that's been in the mid 50s, low 50s in some areas, and then of course by the afternoons we're starting to get back close to the 60s. So that's a big difference in temperature for those fish. So they like that. So when they get to those areas where they can get a little bit deeper water that you can throw your baits off into, say maybe 3 to 5 foot of water to locate over grass or deeper grass beds, if you can know where those areas are. If you have, even back in this area, there's some of that exist. If you know other areas that is that way, then I would suggest that you fish those areas during this time frame until we can get back into a decent warm-up period. Still mud. Mud and shell and grass, that's still the primary focus that these fish are hanging out and around and on. Once you've located a little bit of bait, go to work. Again, topwater bait, there's nothing, like what I said in the last video, there's not a lot of one particular thing that they're wanting. There's been a multiple flavor of things. Again, with the new moon that's fixing to be approaching very fast, I would think that would narrow down somewhat, but you won't know until you get out there on the water and start really working your baits in these particular areas. Get out there on those grass edges, locate your bait, work your potholes with your down souths, with your marker 54 jerk shrimp. That's also another particular bait I didn't mention a minute ago that has been fairly productive as well. Working that thing free lined in and around the potholes, on the drops, on the edges. We've had decent amount of production with those. So just one more thing that you can add to your box to help locate and find fish for you. Down here in Port Bay, this is another one of those areas here on that west shoreline, all the way back here up on this big flat as you get over there off close to 188 and where the kayak launch ramp is right there off the road. This is, especially when you have these big winds, there's a sand ramp that's on the other side there with the old Redfish Camp right there off 188. There's enough water, plenty of water in there. The ramp's not the greatest in the world, but it gets you in this area really fast. You don't have to come all the way from around the Copano Bay Bridge to get there, and especially when you've got big winds to contend with, that's not a bad location to go out of. But that said, get up here on these flats up here. It's protected from that northeast wind. You can fish it fairly easy. Again, when we've had the more water in our system there, we had a few more fish that were showing up that were a little bit closer to the shoreline that we could locate and find, because there's a lot of mud that's on this area there. A little scattered grass. You can get on the other side. You have to make sure if you've got like a little John boat or a kayak or something like that, or if you don't have a big old burn bar that's on your boat, you can get up underneath that 188 bridge, but the right amount of water has to be not in here, should I say. These big coastal flooding that we had for a few days didn't allow that to happen, but we start getting into these lower tides, big tides that are dropping out on us, then you can slide up underneath there and you can get on the other side of the 188 bridge and get into more of that part of Port Bay. It's not fish a tremendous amount, so there's lots of shorelines that lend itself to set up well protected. Locating bait back in that area is always a key thing. You've got some back lake areas that dump way back into some other areas. Get on those things and work it You know, if you can't get out and wade it, then just get on your trolling motor and work down the edges of those areas. Wading it would be best. It's going to be pretty soft back in there, but you take your time. It's manageable. There is a bottom to it, but you may, some of those areas you might sink up to your calf or maybe to your knee in mud, but you can manipulate it and work it and still fish it fairly easy. Might be a little bit more work, but you can do it. And of course, again, that depends on your comfort level and what you want to be in if you're going to wade that. It doesn't, if you're going to, you can bait fish it if that's what you want to do, but throwing the artificials would be the way to go because there's, like I say, there's lots of good shoreline back in there. It doesn't get a tremendous amount of pressure on it just because of the location of it. It's more John boat people, kayak guys. They can get back there very easy with no problem, but if you're able to get up underneath there with your boat, I would suggest that you get back in there. Again, same baits we've been throwing. So, like I say, the last few days, it's been topwater baits have been pretty good at times. Jerk shrimp has been pretty good at times. Burner shads and the original size and a supermodel all in down south in different flavors that I've mentioned earlier, all pretty good. Like I say, not one particular thing was better than the other. It was just a steady production that you got fish on different things. If you got multiple people that you can fish with, more than 2 to 3, even 4 people, everybody can have something a little different, and everybody's going to be a little bit more, they're going to be productive to a degree. So patterning them was kind of difficult to do. Really didn't ever get a sustainable pattern for these fish, especially when our weather systems changed so much and so drastically so soon. So again, we're looking for a nice little warm-up trend that will help put these fish back into that springtime or summertime pattern, and that we can locate and find these fish. Again, make sure that you're incorporating the major and minor into your fishing day to make sure that you continue to stay productive.